anyone need an agenda?
Testing 1 2 check check. Board will be live at 7:30 p.m. Testing 1 2. Board will be live at 7:30 p.m. Board will be live at 7:30 p.m. Check check 1 2 check check.
To order. In compliance with the Open Public Meetings Law of New Jersey, notice of this September 12th, 2023 meeting of the Bridgewater-Raritan Regional Board of Education was posted electronically on the district website and provided on August 28th, 2023 by sending a 48-hour written notice to the Courier News, Star Ledger, Bridgewater Township Clerk, Raritan Borough Clerk, and by posting on the bulletin board in the Harmon V. Wade Administration Building. Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Stars, could you please call the roll?
Ms. Friedlander. Ms. Lee.
Yes.
Ms. Levitt.
Yes.
Ms. Lochran.
Yes.
Mr. Pepe.
Here.
Ms. Calistri.
Here.
Mr. Joshi.
Here.
Mr. Walker.
Present.
Mr. Singer.
Here. We are up to our superintendent's report. Mr. Beers.
Thank you, Mr. Singer. So before we get to our presentations, there's just a little bit of the welcome back message. So 1 week ago, we welcomed nearly 8,000 students back to the halls of Bridgewater-Raritan Regional District. So we know the temperatures were high and schedules were adjusted, but now 5 days into it, we're in a much better place, both routine-wise and certainly temperature-wise. So activities are in full swing at the buildings. We've got before and after care in place. And at the high school, the unit lunch, has been in full effect. And I've got to say, from visiting, the first couple of days are far smoother than the first couple of days of last year. Again, people get in a routine, and then they're in pretty good shape. But what I also have to comment on, and I sent out a message, I believe, a day or two into the school year, that we've certainly had some difficulties with transportation, and specifically with one of the new vendors that we have. So today, Mr. Stars, myself, we met with the company leadership, and they sent multiple representatives, and we're hopeful that the problems will be worked out, and right now, as far as the times of the routes, et cetera, they're significantly better than 5 days ago. And these buses that were significantly late, again, we have to reiterate that although it's significant for all the families that it affects, it is a small subset of our overall transportation. So I want to thank everyone for their efforts. The teachers, they dealt with the sweltering heat. The kids dealt with the sweltering heat. Look, parents, some of them were out at bus stops for longer than they should have been, and I fully understand that, and we're working to rectify that. But overall, and look, with activities, et cetera, we had a bunch of activities where the schedule was changed to later in the day because we had to postpone everything until 6 o'clock or later due to the heat. So although it wasn't perfect, we certainly put our best foot forward, and again, we're happy that the weather broke and we're in a far better place. Now we just hope that hurricane off the coast of us stays off the coast and doesn't come inland. So with that being said, we have a few items on the agenda that I just want to take a minute or two to review. One is I'm sorry, the first one is not on the agenda, but it's going to be spoken about. So the full-day kindergarten vote is on November 7th. Flyers are being distributed, and notifications will be sent out to the community via constant contact and other mechanisms in short order. You have a copy of the brochure that we've been distributing on the first 2 nights of back-to-school nights. It's going to be posted on the website and pushed out. So I also want to say that those who are not in the school community can sign up and receive our constant contact notifications right on the school website. There is a widget there where you could sign up and get those notifications. So tonight we're going to have presentations on both the evaluation system and our district goals and action plans. So So one final part is the Code of Conduct this evening is up for review by the Board of Education. Every year, the Code of Conduct should be reviewed and submitted to the Board of Education for their approval. So I want to just touch base on some of the changes that are in the documents for this year. And we did meet as a group. We should know the process started by looking at some of our disproportionality data. We looked at some of the trends for discipline and what were some of the areas that we needed to try to correct, rectify, etc. So a few changes that we made were that we made sure that the discipline is progressive. What that means is if you commit an infraction of, let's say, cutting class, obviously the first offense is one set of consequences. If you do it again, the punishment goes up. If you do it again, it goes up as well. And that's really for any infraction. And that follows state guidelines, that all discipline should be progressive. So for any suspensions, we made sure that administration is aware that a re-entry conference has to take place. So a re-entry conference is as follows. If you were suspended from school, let's say for a fight or any other offense, on that first day back, or the afternoon, let's say, of your last day of suspension, you're going to have a meeting with building administration, your parents, yourself, and it's not to browbeat the young person over what transpired over the last week, but really to touch base and figure out how we can correct behaviors upon their return to ensure that it doesn't happen again. All right, and that's something that was there to some degree, but we want to make sure it's there in every circumstance. We also added clear consequences for language that are inciting remarks or acts of a racial, ethnic, gender, sexual, or biased nature. This is one of the topics that came up. We saw an increase in this type of behavior in our HIB reports and in our disciplinary reports from last year. We felt it was a problem. I also had a conference with multiple parents over this issue. And I promised them that in our Code of Conduct review, we would certainly include this language so there's consistency across the board. So when we look at the Code of Conduct, there are grade bands and consistency across schools and grade levels. Those grade levels are obviously the primary, the intermediate, then the middle school and high school. You will notice that there are changes from obviously the elementary school to the high school, and you have infractions at the high school level that are not at the elementary or middle school or intermediate level. And a lot of it makes sense, right? You're not going to have a parking infraction down at the elementary level, right? You're not going to have drug and alcohol issues and some of these other items that we may have at the higher grades down at the lower grades. So this Code of Conduct, by statute, should show itself in student handbooks and will be posted on the website for each school. And I think as we look at it, the content is really what's important. When we look at the format, like I'll agree, each document has a different format, and that's due to those grade bands. But again, they're going to take the information off that, make it consistent, put it up on the website. And finally, and this is something that's important to me as a parent of teenagers, when we talk about student wellness, one of the things that we've done K to 12, and this is really important when we look at the high school, we are creating cell phone-free learning environments. All right, and I'll say that again, cell phone-free learning environments. That means at the high school level, if you walk into a classroom, there is a place or a cubby to put your phone. It is not on your person. And there are clear reasons for that. A, we know the damage that social media and et cetera plays in a young person's life. We can't combat that 100%, but we can make sure that when a student is sitting in an English class, that they don't have that type of influence or I don't know, I'm losing my words, I'm sorry. Distraction, I'm sorry. or distraction. So that's incredibly important. And look, there's plenty of learning research that also shows just having this in your vicinity is distraction. You know, when we look at how people work effectively, you know, even folks our age, there's plenty of tips to say, if you really want to get things done at work, take this, shut it off, put it in a drawer, and then work on what you need to work on for an hour or an hour and a half. And it goes the same for kids. It's really difficult to learn with this distraction next to you. And what's interesting about the research, and I believe I shared it with the board in the board brief, I think there was an article on it. What's interesting about the research is even with cell phones, even if it's not yours and it's sitting on someone else's desk, it affects your learning because it's a distraction. So we're doing our best. It's a new era. But I think when we look at wellness of kids and really promoting academic achievement, it all starts with the phones. And if there's an article anyone wants to look up, and I'll include it in the in our weekly brief or following the meeting, there was an article from Doug Lemov, who's one of the foremost authors on education, really in the country. He's written books like Teach Like a Champion. You know, there's a few volumes of that. And he's really an interesting person. And he wrote an article recently, I believe in the Atlantic, that had a great title. It said, "Take the cell phones away." And it's clear that's what we need to do. We're working towards that. And I know I'm rambling a little bit too much, but it's important. And it's a lot to tackle for high school, middle school, and every grade. So that's it. A decade ago, people tried to say, well, maybe we need to teach kids how to be responsible with them. Doesn't work. Just doesn't work. So that is what we're moving towards, and those are the major changes with the Code of Conduct, and we can have further discussions on that. Now finally, with security. I've had a few messages on security, so I wanted to just clarify what I've shared with the Board of Ed, with the public. So this year, our district has added 5 additional security personnel positions, which brings our security personnel overall up to the following levels. We have 2 security directors. One is at the high school, one is at the middle school. We have 9 campus monitors. Campus monitors are district personnel who are retired law enforcement. 2 of these folks were Class 3 officers who worked for Bridgewater last year. So we took them on. So the 9 campus monitors circulate throughout the district. We also have 2 school resource officers, and we have 3 Class 3 officers. So this is something we're proud of, and I think the public should be confident in what we're trying to do. So 2 years ago, security essentially was comprised of 2 resource officers and 3 Class 3 officers. We've increased our security footprint by 11 individuals, or 220%. The Bridgewater PD, I think I mentioned it back in August, has been very inclusive and has helped coordinate active shooter training with our campus monitors. That's going to take place next week at Camp Cromwell. Should also note that the Raritan Borough PD has been excellent partners as well. Raritan Borough probably visits JFK School 4 to 5 times on a given day. Right? They have a swipe, they come in, they interact with our folks, and we have an excellent relationship. So overall, our security has improved exponentially. We coordinate with both local police departments and have highly trained individuals on staff. Personally, I wish my kids had this situation at their schools. I'm going to be giving a presentation to the public, along with Mike Voorhees and Ted Lewis, who are the 2 security directors, on September 26th at our Board of Education meeting, where we'll go into this in more depth. So I've got to mention this, and I don't want to give it any more oxygen, but I've been somewhat bombarded with rumors about a reduction in force, specifically in the police officers stationed in our schools. So I've got to say that any reduction in force would be the result of decisions made by the Bridgewater Township administration. And they have yet to communicate this directly to me. I contact the mayor on a weekly basis. I call him, text him, email him, and he's yet to share this information with me. So at this point, I can't speak for Bridgewater Township, but no one has communicated this rumor directly to me. So that's where we are with security. I think we're in an excellent spot, and whatever the township decides to do, we'll be able to react accordingly and provide safety and security for our students. So I know I'm a little long-winded here. Now we'd like to get to our presentations. And the first presentation is going to be in our district goals and action plan. And I'm going to present with my colleague, Ms. Karen Jones, who is the Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction. So hang on one second. Put this up. Get up and walk around. You know that.
It's coming up. There you go. Yep. You're all good.
So again, our presentation is on the district goals for 2023-24. So for any goal that we present to the Board of Education and share with the public, a best practice is to have it as a data-informed goal. And what that means is that there are actual numbers that back up what we're trying to look at and trying to improve. It's really not complex. There are a lot of measures here we'll go over that are pretty straightforward, and I think most people can understand fairly easily. So the overlying goal we know with our district is equity. And some of the areas which will help us achieve that equity are in the following areas. So our graduation rate, I'll give you the statistic on the next slide, but it does need some work. And in order to improve that, we're looking at out-of-class supports, alternative program, and we've made a lot of revisions to the ESL program. Full-day kindergarten is another area of equity where we're going to have a vote on November 7th as the third question of our referendum. PSAT. It sounds fairly straightforward, but only 44% of our students currently take the PSAT. All right, it's far below the state average, and this is an area where we want to provide all students with the same access to potential college placements, etc. And then finally, with our ESL programming, that is something that we've seen multiple presentations on, and the major theme of ESL programming is that now kids can get ESL services K-4 in their home schools. Okay. And these data points are easily found on the New Jersey School Performance Report. These come out each summer. And the difficult part is that these data points are based on the 2021-22 school year. So what I'm showing you is not last year, it's the year before, and that's kind of how the state operates. You're essentially a year behind. So, I know. So our graduation rate, 92.7%. That's not where it should be. Full-day kindergarten, there are fewer than 10 districts in the state of New Jersey that do not have it. Our AP access. This number we feel is low because it's 46.1% of the student body, but you should know that that number is a little bit skewed. And it's not skewed just for us, but it's for everyone in the state. So our AP access, when you look at each graduating class, it's less than 46%, and this is why. The way the state calculates this number is as follows. They take the number of juniors and seniors in the class in both grades. That's your denominator. The numerator is based on all the kids, grades 10, 11, and 12, who take an AP class. So again, the numerator is not 11th and 12th graders, it's 10th, 11th, and 12th graders. So that's not just our school, but it's every school in the state has a somewhat inflated number for that statistic. See, you didn't know that, did you, Barry?
What's the number just with the regular seniors and juniors and seniors? What's the number not state calculated? Sorry, I'm just...
It's slightly less than 40%.
That's what I was going to say. Thank you. I was looking for
Slightly less.
whatever the state has.
Correct. So PSAT access, 44.7% of our students take the PSAT. We have a 77% state average. So that's obviously a number we want to improve on. And then when we look at the data points we certainly want to improve on and continue to take a look at are the percent of students in Tier 3 interventions, and that's grades K through 6. So last year, according to the data that we had internally, we had 373 students, grades K through 6, who received Tier 3 interventions. All right, and that's about 9.8% of the population. Now there's more to that data point because we want to see how many kids had Tier 3 intervention and moved out, et cetera. So there are other data points we can look at within that number. But those are really just some basic places to start. And for full transparency, they can be taken right from the New Jersey School Performance Report that comes out every August. Yes?
Could you just explain what Tier 3 is versus other tiers?
Yes, so there are tiers of intervention. Tier 1 is actually not intervention. Tier 1 is your regular classroom instruction. Tier 2 is when you're providing something different for a student because they're having difficulty learning just through typical classroom instruction. And Tier 2 is supposed to be something that's in addition to Tier 1, not, instead of. Tier 3 would be the next kind of level up. So that would be for a student who needs more intervention. It could be that they need more time, or it could be that they're working in a smaller cohort with a teacher. But again, a student who's receiving Tier 3 instruction would still have that Tier 1, which is just classroom instruction. They would have that additional way of maybe teaching something, which is Tier 2, and then Tier 3, perhaps a different way, more time. And typically they would be working with one of our intervention specialists. So that's what Tier 3 is, and as Mr. Beers was just saying, the goal, of course, isn't to have students in Tier 2 and 3. It's to provide that service for them while they need it, and then have really clear exit criteria and make sure we're exiting students out of the program, because that shows that the intervention has been successful. Do you want me to just keep going at this point? Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Jones.
All right. The other thing, I wanted to give all the good news. So the other thing that I wanted to say is, despite what Mr. Beers just talked about as far as some of the statistics, this is something that we are already aware of, and we're already working on it. So our goals this year are really a continuation of last year's goals. And even in looking at the Tier 3 intervention, like one change that we can kind of look at, I'm already out of order here, but one change that we can look at would be the fact that we now have ESL services, right, in all of our buildings. So in the past, because we didn't, and some students' parents would refuse services because they didn't want their students to travel across town, sometimes then you're providing services in a different way. So we might have had students who actually what they needed were English language learner services, and instead what they were getting might have been Tier 3 interventions. So we're going to watch how all this kind of plays out and monitor where students are and when they're being exited, and which students are, receiving these services. All right, so our district goal we went over the summer, and I think we probably talked about it twice already, but so I'm going to do the quick review for Mr. Starr's birthday today. I'm going to go through this quickly. So the overall goal is to build the capacity of district community members by expanding programs, which is something that we started already, refining systems to support student growth, and also promoting equitable opportunities. So PSATs, great example, because the reason ours were lower than the state average is because we didn't provide it, PSATs. And many schools just test all their students with PSATs, and for us it was an option that parents could do on weekends. Now we'll be testing all 9th, 10th, 11th graders and some 12th grade students, so we're moving in that direction. So the last time that I talked about the goal, I talked about having multi-year goals, and this is really the second year of a very similar goal. And as we're going through multi-year goals, we're looking at how measurements change. So the first thing that we're always looking at is when we're building a new process measurements and building those processes. Eventually, in a year or 2 years, what will happen is the process then reaches the classroom, and that's where you want the goal to be. And then we'll be able to look more specifically at measures of student achievement. All right, so there's 3 sub-goals under the overall goal, and the first one is to optimize conditions for learning by implementing effective instructional practices that support all students. So the board has the action plan, so I'm just going to highlight some of it. When we think, for example, about improving graduation rates, we're doing really 2 things. We have some kind of short-term, immediate things that we can implement, and we're doing this right at the high school level. And then we have some, let's call them longer-term solutions, because it's kind of some of the changes that we're making district-wide K-8 that we're eventually going to see the impact of in the high school. So at the high school, we're implementing tutoring and support for students who are struggling, and this would be structured learning labs, but it's also tutoring after school that's available. We're creating additional credit recovery options, and that'll keep kids on track for graduation. As you know, we implemented some alternate pathways by creating additional courses for high school mathematics, and we're implementing an alternative program. Finally, across the district, we're looking again at intervention, and we're making sure that students had access, and this would be part of like changing that middle school schedule, which provides you with that additional time I was talking about before. So we're not just removing kids or giving them something different, but we're giving them their regular instruction plus additional time in intervention if they need that. Again, it's clear criteria, but our emphasis is going to remain on that tier 1 instruction and making sure that just your traditional classroom instruction is very strong. When we want to look at evidence and outcomes, we're going to look at program enrollment. Again, it's just because the enrollment high isn't necessarily what we want to look at. We want to see that students are accessing and then exiting programs as appropriate. Of course, we want to look at the impact of these programs on student grades, the NJSLA scores, NJ GPA results, and the percentage of students who are receiving these tiered intervention services. In order to implement any of these actions, we need to have resources. So our resources here are those instructional coaches that we originally hired with our ESSER funds, great use of ESSER funds. Professional development time that's built into our calendar, the structured learning labs that we'll have at the high school. We have some new technology platforms, which actually are how we're going to provide some additional seat time for students who need it, or some remediation, credit recovery. It's also what we're using for the alternative program, the additional intervention period at the middle school, and of course our new mathematics courses. All right, second sub-goal, is to ensure a healthy and safe learning environment by refining operations and providing opportunities that foster the social and emotional well-being for students and staff. So again, you're going to see that some of the actions that we're taking overlap from the first part of the goal, like implementing the tutoring and supports for struggling students. But if you look district-wide, one important emphasis that we talked about last year and we're going to be doing this year is to review our whole K-12 counseling program. The other thing that we're doing as a district is we're going to be partnering with Rutgers to administer a climate survey to all our stakeholders. And then our evidence outcomes will be, again, program enrollment, our students' grades, the percentage of students in tiered services. We're going to look at classroom practice, so we can do that through lesson plans and observations, which Dr. Fonder will be talking about, observations. And then what are the recommendations that actually come out of this review of our K-12 counseling program, our climate survey results? And whenever we're doing new things, we're implementing new things and we're providing professional development, or we're hoping to provide parent workshops, one measurement that we use is attendance, right? The attendance, and that, you know, these things are reflected on our agendas. Finally, with code of conduct, we're looking at a clearly documented process. All right, third goal. So our third goal is to ensure equitable allocation of the district resources. This is the one I think we made a lot of progress with last year, to support the district's mission goals, including access and utilization of grade level materials, resources, and programs. So the big one this year, you all know, is the referendum, and we're hoping to be planning for a full day kindergarten. We also implemented changes already with our continuum of services and gifted and talented, the fact that we have ESL services across all our schools. We'll continue to look at ways to increase and improve the services. PSAT, we discussed, will give us a much better idea of where students are a good match for AP classes, and we'll be able to use the information that we get back from these PSAT reports to make recommendations to students about AP. We can check enrollment this year. That's something we can measure. And then by next year, we'll look at the success of the students who we've identified in these classes, their grades, how they do on AP tests. And then the other evidence outcomes that we're going to always be focused on, and I think you've probably seen this in all our testing reports, is that we want to look at the percentage of students receiving these different services or accessing these continuum of services, but we also want to look at our demographics and their percentage demographics of students who enroll in AP courses, and their percentage and demographics of students who enroll in dual credit courses. So again, we always need professional development time. We're going to be looking at building community partnerships, curriculum development time, and of course the tests themselves. And then back to you, Mr. Hughes.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. So the next steps are obviously, and I know the board and the public will want to know, all right, when do we hear the updates? So we set these goals, well, what are the targets? Obviously for kindergarten, we've got a vote coming up on November 7th. That's binary. We'll know yes or no. The PSAT is administered in October of 2023. We received the results a few weeks after, and how that helps us with AP access, which we'll find out in May 2024, is the PSAT actually has a measure where they if you reach a certain score, you fit the criteria then for an AP class. All right, so you can get that through the PSAT scores of kids, just to find out what I believe they call it the AP potential. So you can look at your student body and see what kids have that potential, and then you look and say what kids maybe are not accessing these higher end courses, and we should maybe give them a nudge, give them a push, what have you, to do so. The graduation rate, that will come out in August of 2024 from again, the New Jersey School Performance Reports. But no, the graduation rate, I mean, this is a statistic where you're playing the long game. You can make small improvements initially. I believe with things like the out-of-class supports, the alternative program, we can see some improvement. But to really have that systemic improvement, you've got to wait for some of the programs that we're implementing to really run their course. I know we've talked about this as a group. I think you have to look at some of these stats. It's like, hey, if I'm trying to lose 20 pounds, or if I want to run a marathon, well, I can't really tell what my progress is after 1 week, right? But after a few months, after 6 months, after a year, after 2 years, then you really see where you are. And I think it's the same thing. There are some that will take time. Tier 3 intervention numbers are in June. And the success of the alternative program, the alternative program is going to be, I see I have a little delay there. That's interesting. But,
you want to listen to yourself.
so anyhow, the success of the alternative program we'll report out on January and in June as well, because we have a feeling that this program may continue to expand. And the ESL data is one that we'll have in May and June, where we can share the test scores that we have previously, but to really see the impact of the changes at the elementary level, right? It's going to take a few years for that to really come out in the wash, so to speak. But we're certainly taking out bottlenecks. We are creating a system that is more equitable, and it will just take time to process. So that's it. And now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Fonder. And I'm going to switch presentations here. And he's going to give us an update. Again, when we look at delivery of curriculum, I think it's good for the Board of Education and the public to understand the evaluation system, what we've trained teachers on, and really the work that his department, administrators, and supervisors, principals, central office administrators conduct throughout the school year. So, I'll hand it over to Dr. Fonder.
Which one is the advanced one? Thanks, and well, Mr. Beers is pulling up the presentation. I mean, one of the things just to kind of reflect on, because I've been in this position only this is my 3rd year in the position, is this is a great September. So if you think about other Septembers and the things that we've been talking about, it's wonderful that we're talking about the district goals and our progress towards the district goals. It's wonderful that we're talking about the teachers and the administrators and the learning that's happening in the classroom, because we've had lots of other things that have taken the board meeting's time, appropriately so, but it's great that we're focused on where the focus should be. Yes, you're going to need those glasses. So this one is about evaluation of personnel. So I'm going to run through a couple of slides here, and then I can take any questions at the end of it if there's anything that I don't get to. The goal in total is for the board members and for anyone from the public who's watching to have a sense of what our evaluation of personnel is all about. This focuses on certificated staff, the people who have certificates from the Department of Education. And one of the things that I wanted to first highlight is there's a state statute, there's a law that governs this. There had always been a state statute that kind of told school districts that you had to evaluate your teachers and staff, but it wasn't really until the Teach New Jersey Act and then the Achieve New Jersey that this became more prescriptive. Before that, it was really more of a kind of a general statement. And now there's a lot of things that are dictated by the State Department of Education. There are a lot of very good things that are part of this as well. And if anyone is in the field of education, one of the things that it did is things are much more standard from district to district than they used to be. It used to be that each district you'd kind of find out what the rules of the game are, like somebody was putting out a new board game that you'd never played on your table. And now it's very much like, oh, it's Monopoly, but it's Atlantic City style Monopoly, or it's Star Wars Monopoly. So there's a couple different wrinkles, but the districts are doing it more the same. So the first is that Star Wars Monopoly. I was thinking about the ones on my shelf at home. The first part is that educator effectiveness has to be measured on a 4-point rubric, and we report those scores to the state at the end of the year. So each person has a score that's a composite score from a few different things, but on that 4-point, every district is using this scale where a 4 is highly effective, a 3 is effective, a 2 is partially effective, and a 1 is effective. So even just having a standard rubric and scoring is something that was new. Also that it had to be based on multiple measures, learning outcomes and effective practice. So this was a big thing that came out of No Child Left Behind and federal legislation that said you couldn't just have somebody come in and say, yeah, everything looks good. You had to have multiple measures, and so that's part of it as well. And you'll see that specifically what that is in New Jersey in a couple slides to come. Also that there's timelines. These timelines are now in the guidance from the Department of Ed, and so it used to always be kind of known that timely feedback is the best feedback. If you tell me something to do differently within a week, it's much better than if you tell me a couple months later, because then I have time to implement it. But now there's strict timelines that are part of the guidance as well, and so those are things that we of course follow. And tenure in New Jersey for teaching staff and other certified staff is statutory, and so this now requires effective ratings. Before that, it was just based on the amount of time that you were working in the district. Now it's the amount of time, and you have to have effective ratings, and there's a kind of a flow chart of where you have to have those effective ratings to get tenured. Then the second part of this, the Bridgewater-Raritan piece, is we of course adhere to the state requirements. We've got all of those. We also build systems to implement it because we're a large district and you can't kind of just say like, okay, yeah, everybody, this is the things to do. We have systems that I'll get into a little bit about what we do here. And also within those systems, trying to make sure that we're doing the best practices. A good example of this is that you have to have a post-conference, a post-observation conference, which is the debriefing with the teacher or other professional after doing an observation. And the way we do ours is based on what the Danielson rubric, the rubric that we use, and the guidance on what's the best way to promote teacher growth and reflection in practice. So about teacher evaluation, there's two charts here. I'm not going to read through both of them. There's a lot of similarities for non-tenured and tenured teachers. The biggest difference is that for non-tenured teachers, there has to be at least 3 observations that are at least 20 minutes each. And for tenured teachers, there has to be at least 2 observations that are at least 20 minutes each. The rest of the things there are pretty similar. At least one has to be announced, and at least one has to be unannounced. There has to be a professional development plan, a PDP, that the teacher is creating. This is the goals that tap into the district goals and building or department goals, but also personal and individualized goals for the teacher. Part of those student performance, those learning outcome metrics, one is student growth objectives. These are set locally based on some of our local assessments that we do. Teachers work with administrators to set the SGOs based on their students. Also, there's the median student growth percentile. This is based on the state testing. And so for teachers of English language arts and math in grades 4 through 8, they get a score that's their median student growth percentile, and that's another student output score that's part of the overall school composite of their scoring for the year. We also have a summative evaluation, a final evaluation for the year that's in the spring. That's true for both. There's lesson plan review and also informal classroom walkthroughs. One thing that Achieve New Jersey did that hadn't really been done before is the administrator evaluation for principals, assistant principals, and supervisors is very similar. And so this is the list for tenured and non-tenured administrators. Again, non-tenured, at least 3 observations. The difference is that it's recommended by the Department of Ed that these not be a single event, but a window of time where you're observing the principal or assistant principal or supervisor doing multiple things over a period of time instead of, for instance, just watching one faculty meeting where the principal is talking to the staff. That might be one part of it, observing a meeting that the person conducts, but it's not the only thing that's used for the observation. It's a window of time and the overall work during that time. For tenured, it's 2. Also, professional development plans are required. For administrators, there's administrator goals that are required. There's a median student growth percentile, a median SGP, which is the average for a larger group, like a school's median student growth percentile. And then also there's a median student growth objective for the different teachers within that school would be the average there. Summative evaluation in the spring is done. There's also informal school department walkthroughs by some of the senior administrators. Those would be the superintendent, assistant superintendents, and directors. One of the pieces that's required with a robust evaluation system is that there's adequate training so that anyone who's being evaluated this way understands how they're going to be evaluated. So there's specific things we do for new administrators and for new teachers, so those are the ones that are listed there. For the new administrators, we go over everything in August. That's an evaluation system overview. And then there's also a small group how-to session because there's a lot of specific things that the administrators will need to do as they're evaluating as the new administrators are evaluating our teachers. There's also a one-on-one review of the instrument and procedures with the direct supervisor of the administrator as necessary. We do co-observations or dual observations where there's 2 administrators observing together. This is a way of calibrating to make sure that the rubric and the instrument are being used correctly. For new teachers, we go over this during our new staff orientation, which happens during the last week of August. So that's our chance to make sure that everyone knows what the rubric is and how we use it in Bridgewater-Raritan. Some people might be brand new to teaching. Other people are coming from another district in New Jersey. The Danielson framework, which is the one we use, is the most common one used in New Jersey, but there are others. And so there are teachers who are familiar with this process, but not with our particular framework. There's also evaluation training for all staff that's done by the building or department. There's, again, the one-on-one review as is necessary. We have a new teacher induction support where the new teacher induction sessions focus on evaluation. And the different assigned administrators during the process also walk the new teachers through that. The training on the evaluation instrument for experienced staff, it's less because these are people who are returning. We highlight things that are new, and we don't go through the same level that we go through with new staff. But for administrators, everyone has an evaluation system overview in August. That was part of our administrator week. One-on-one review as is needed. Dual observations are a requirement. Each administrator who's doing observations has to do at least 2 per year, so we build a schedule for that. Teachers, there's an evaluation training for all teachers that's done by the building or department in the fall. One-on-one review as is necessary, and then each administrator, as they're doing the process during the conferences, will talk about the process as well. This is just a look at the Charlotte Danielson framework. This is, again, one of the approved ones by the Department of Ed. They have a list of a number of different approved frameworks or rubrics that you can use. This is the most common one that's used in New Jersey, so a lot of teachers are familiar with this one. It's been used in Bridgewater-Raritan since the mid-2000s. So I was a teacher in the district until 2007, and I remember when this was new. It was sometime around 2004. I didn't go back to my notes to see exactly which year it was, but we've been using it since before it was required to have a framework, and we've been using it since then. So the nice thing for our staff is that people who've been here for a while, we're not that district that keeps switching things around, that we've been using this consistently for almost 20 years now. The goal is to promote reflective practice and growth. So if you ever hear Charlotte Danielson, the person who is the author of the book and who talks about this, the goal wasn't to make an evaluation system. The goal was to not have it be a mystery what great teaching is. And so that's what the real gift of this is when teachers are using it to improve their practice even outside of the observation process. For the administrators, there wasn't really, Charlotte Danielson doesn't have an administrator, a principal version of it, and so the Department of Ed set out to create one that was based on the PSELs, the Professional Standards for Educational Leaders, but that had a flow and a feel that was like the Danielson framework for teachers, and so that's the one that we use. It's pretty consistent in terms of its structure with domains and components, and the idea of this is that you have a framework. It's really clear what great administrators do, principals, assistant principals, supervisors. And then this graphic is from the Department of Ed, and this shows the observation window and the idea that just as there would be a post-conference and a document produced after a teacher observation, there would be after the observation window for an administrator. In Bridgewater-Raritan, it's a big district. I have some numbers on a slide or two to come, but we try to make sure that our process makes sure everything gets done the right way. We have a lot of different administrators, so we have to coordinate between the multiple administrators, but we want to build a system to make sure it happens the right way. A teacher shouldn't have one observation, and before they even have the post-conference or get the document with the feedback, that they're scheduling the next one. So we have these rounds of observations to make sure that our administrators know that if you have someone in round 1, you have to do it between this date and this date. The person who's doing round 2 doesn't contact the person to schedule the observation until that window of time. And so we have things, pretty sorted out that way, and it allows us to make sure the observations are appropriately spread throughout the year and to coordinate among the different administrators involved. It also allows time for feedback and professional growth. Ideally, if I'm observed as a teacher and I'm given a piece of feedback, I would want to have time to own that and to put it into practice in my classroom before the next observation when somebody else is coming in seeing if I'm doing it. So we have these spreadsheets, just a couple of numbers to highlight here. There's over 860 certified staff members that we have, so it's a pretty big group. All of them have to have Most of them have 2 observations and then a summative evaluation. The non-tenured ones have to have 3 observations and then a summative evaluation. So we're talking about well over 2,500 entries, 2,500 documents that are produced. We do have 40 administrators, but when you divide that out, it's a lot per administrator. It's about 65 to 75 assigned observations or evaluations per administrator. And that's why we have to have a system that's really pinpointed, so this way everyone knows exactly what their responsibility is. There's a giant spreadsheet that we have, and all the administrators are very familiar with it. Some are anxiously awaiting it when I'm about to send it. Others are say, when I send it. But all the information is also in OnCourse, which is our system that we use to manage the process for teachers and for administrators. And so it's a good way to keep everyone focused and organized. There's a similar spreadsheet that's created for all of the principals, assistant principals, and supervisors, where the central office team, the superintendent, assistant superintendents, and directors have their observations and evaluations noted. When I was putting together this presentation, at one point I was thinking that not everyone knows what an observation looks like. So just quickly walking through it. The pre-observation conference is required when it's an announced observation. This is a meeting that's scheduled where the teacher and the administrator meet. The teacher typically would talk about what's going to happen during the observation, what the class has been working on, going through the lesson plan. If it's an unannounced, then the observer would review the lesson plan in advance, but there wouldn't be a meeting because then it couldn't be an unannounced observation. The observation has to be in person. This is the administrator coming into the typically the classroom and observing for at least 20 minutes. And then separate, on a different day, there has to be a post-observation conference. This is the debriefing meeting where the teacher and the administrator are talking about teaching and learning and what the teacher can do to continue great practices and to do things differently if necessary. So most observations have 2 or 3 different appointments as part of it. A pre-observation conference, the observation itself, post-observation conference. And then that's followed by an observation document. All of them have a document that captures the discussion, the evidence collected by the administrator, and also what the feedback is. My last slide is a thank you. Appreciate your time and attention. I did put up a quote by Doug Lemov. I did not know that Mr. Beers was going to mention Doug Lemov earlier. We didn't plan that, but it makes me happy that I picked a Doug Lemov quote because the superintendent mentioned Doug Lemov just a little while ago. He's an educational researcher, so he's not a licensed teacher, but he's written books on teaching, and what he basically does is finds the great practices and says, like, if everyone who does these finds success with them, let's make sure that everyone knows about them. To some extent, on a smaller scale, less famous scale, that's what all of our administrators do. We have a lot of really experienced and talented educators in Bridgewater-Raritan. So there are people who were talking about this didn't work, we have to do something different. But more often it's making sure teachers know what the great practices are that they're doing and that they should continue doing. I always said as a teacher that if I was doing something great and no one ever told me it was great, I may or may not continue doing it. But if someone tells me, that's really great, you should do that, I'm going to keep doing it, I'm going to do more of it, and so that's as important a part of the process, especially for our experienced educators. Thank you. Appreciate your time and attention.
Thank you, Dr. Fonder.
I have a question.
Sure.
When you assign, yeah, I was gonna leave, so I said.
I wasn't going to leave, but yes.
But the administrators who observe,
Mhm.
do you just pick them out randomly, or how is that done?
No, so an example would be at the elementary level, at the primary school level, the people who might observe a second grade teacher would be the principal, the language arts supervisor, the math supervisor, the science social studies supervisor. There's other people who could observe also, like Karen Jones, Dan Fonder, the directors, Anne-Marie Mattia, Jason Morrill, Jamie Kotchis, but for the most part, it would be the direct supervisors, the content supervisors, or the principal. If it was a related arts teacher, it might be that content supervisor, or again, a building principal, or if you get into the other levels, assistant principal. So at the high school, it could be the principal, one of the 4 assistant principals, or the department supervisor. And oftentimes it's a combination. One thing that I didn't include in there is for non-tenured, it's required that there has to be at least 2 different observers. So it can't be one person who does all 3 observations and the summative. There has to be at least 2 different opinions in there. For tenured, that's not a requirement, and so some of our tenured teachers might have observation 1 and 2 done by the same person, and other people would have it done by 2 different people. Good question. Any others? Yeah.
So you mentioned in there that the non-tenured administrators, there's dual observing. So you go in, another administrator will go in with that non-tenured administrator. So you actually have more than what? How many is that? 65? So
Correct.
I was just wondering.
Yes.
I was doing numbers here.
There are more.
Denominator here. I'm just.
There are more. One of the things that we do, which I think is how most districts handle this, is when we have 2 observers. So if I was going to do a dual observation with a principal, we don't write 2 competing narratives and 2 competing reports for the teacher. Only one document is produced, but it is both of us there for the pre-conference, the observation, the post-conference, and throughout the process, there's also the conversations in between, and that's where the professional development for the administrators come in. And what did you see? What are your takeaways? What are you going to focus on in the post-conference with the teacher? Because like all of us, if you start listing out for a first-year teacher 10 things to do differently, that's not the best way to do it. You want to kind of focus on 2 or 3 things that are the most important things for them to work on now. And so part of the process would be the 2 administrators talking about what's the most important thing for this teacher to work on now.
We also, I think we have mentor teachers for new teachers too, right?
Yeah, so the state requires...
Does that fall into the program, or is that outside of this, or how does that work?
It's related. So the state requires mentoring for anyone who has a CE, a Certificate of Eligibility, or a CEAS, a Certificate of Eligibility with Advanced Standing. If anyone wants to know what the difference is, I can assist you with that, but I'm not going to get into that now. It's a Department of Ed thing with certification. Mentors do observe the new teachers as well, but those are not evaluative. So they could certainly reference the framework, but they're not going to produce an official observation report. It's meant to be a kind of peer-to-peer mentoring that's different from the evaluative process.
So that's an additional way we ensure success in new teachers. So
Exactly.
We want to
Yep.
get them started right, the best. Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you. And also as a reference, I did leave for each board member the board's role in personnel. I think it's a pretty good read. And it was co-written by Gwen Thornton, who has been in front of us a few times. And it really gives an overview of what the board's role in personnel would be. And there's reference to statute, et cetera. So certainly take a look and then, just for your reference. Thank you.
Anything else?
That's it.
So I just want to first start off with, I'm sorry, we're up to my president's report. We've never had that presentation before on evaluations that Barry's aware of, and he's been here longest. So I want to thank you and Mr. Beers for providing that information. I think that was really helpful and informative to us. And I don't have Star Wars Monopoly, but I have played Star Wars Risk.
Can I jump in with a quick question?
Please.
Is there a whether it counts for the final score or not, I know some districts will have a self-evaluation component. Is there anything like that here as part of the Danielson model?
Good question. So first, I just want a quick response to Mr. Singer. It was Mr. Beer's idea. I was happy to do it, but he had the idea, which I thought was great, and I'm happy to do it other years in the future. I'll try to throw in a new wrinkle or at least a new jokes to keep it fresh, even if there's nothing big that changes. And then as far as the teacher self-reflection, one of the things that we do that's different than, because I know what a lot of other districts do, in some districts at the post-observation conference, that debriefing meeting, the administrator comes and they've already scored the observation. So basically it's telling the teacher, here's how you did on the observation. The best practice for it is actually to have a conversation where the teacher is reflecting and the administrator is reflecting. So we don't do that. The administrators give the teachers the evidence they collected, and the whole conversation is meant to be where the teacher says, what I was trying to do is this. It didn't really work out, but what I would do next time is, so the idea of it is that the conversation is reflective. The document at the end does not have a separate scoring page where it's a self-reflection, but that idea of self-reflection and growth is certainly built into our discussion process.
So the actual scores come more at the end of the year, not after an individual.
Oh no, they do. So
they do come after
each
lesson
observation
two.
is scored.
Got it.
But what I was saying is that
Yeah.
if you were observing me, I would have your observation notes of the evidence that you collected, but I wouldn't have your scoring. You wouldn't make that determination until after we had a
Oh, after the
conversation about
conversation, okay.
what happened in the lesson, and I might
Got it.
share some additional context or reflection that,
Got it. That makes
would
a lot
you
of
say,
sense.
oh, okay, I understand this
And-
differently or better now.
You should probably be observing me, though, in that scenario, but thank you. But thank you.
Any other questions for Dr. Fonder? Lucy?
I don't have a question for Dr. Founder, but I have a comment from one of our earlier presenter. When it comes to board goals, there was one line that's talking about the referendum. I want to remind us all that by New Jersey law, the Board of Ed as a whole, each elected member in their official capacity, the school district or the district staff in their official capacity, should not present the referendum with a tendency for yes or no. We should present the information in a neutral way. We should avoid using words like support or vote yes or success. We should rather use the neutral words such as here's the information or completion of the vote and encourage people to vote. I just want to make a comment so that we're mindful when in the future we're talking about the referendum going forward. Thank you.
I'm going to go on to my president's report at this point. First off, I want to welcome back all of our students and staff. There's cheering at our fields again. Music can be heard in the campuses, and students are growing and learning with their fantastic teachers, and happy to have everyone back. On behalf of the board, I'm going to extend our best wishes for a fun, productive, and positive year in our schools. Mr. Beer has already talked about this, but if anyone is not a member of our school in terms of being a parent or a teacher or a student, the newsletter is now available to all Bridgewater-Raritan residents, not just students and parents. I want to extend our kudos to Mr. Moran and Mr. Beers for putting together a newsletter that has reached an immense number of people. I encourage everyone to go, if they haven't seen it in their emails, they can go onto our website. There is a link for the newsletter there as well, wherein they can find information on the referendum there or by visiting our referendum page at brsd.org. Ms. Jones already mentioned this, but one of our administrators made the mistake of mentioning that today is his birthday. And I'm not going to embarrass him by asking that we sing, but I want to wish Mr. Stars a very happy birthday and thank him for spending his birthday with us. I'm not going to sing. Mr. Stars does an excellent job as both our business administrator and our board secretary for these meetings, and just want to wish him a happy and healthy year. I hope this birthday makes the minutes. Finally, on a more somber note, this year marks the 22nd anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. Many lives were lost in our communities, and the events of that day have had a long-lasting impact on our lives. Many of us were in New York. Many of us were just affected and think about it every day, if not every year. I can't find words to do justice to our thoughts and feelings from that day, so I'll simply ask that we take a minute of silence in remembrance and contemplation. Thank you. Sorry to transition to you on this, but Mr. Walker, Vice President's report.
Thank you, Steve. Bob, we don't have Peter's birthday in the board calendar. Just next year, can we add that? All right, we'll put that in. District calendar. It's on the board calendar. So, anyways, following up on last month, we have one more item for August to get done. I talked to Mr. Reeves about the public presentation of the acceptable use policy. I think it's next board meeting, right? We have on September approved the board goals and action plans tonight, which are on the agenda for this evening. We also have approved the comprehensive maintenance plan, which is also on the agenda for this evening. Probably next board meeting we'll have the presentation of the self-assessment of the Anti-Bullying Rights Act, the first meeting, and then we have a second meeting, the approval of that of the school assessment under the Anti-Bullying Act. Did we do that already? No. Okay, we didn't. We did something like that a while ago, but my apologies. And we also have the approval of the MOA for law enforcement, which is policy 9320. Coming up in October, we have the student safety data system report, and pending legal matters. And we still have that out from August. We didn't get a legal update, I think, in June or July. So we still have that pending. And we have the approval in October of the school and safety and security plan. That's all I have. And I'd also like to reiterate, I think school year always gets fun to start. I wish everyone the best. You know, I mean, I got to say, buses are going to always late the first week. So I found that when my daughter, it's like 13 years, I can't remember what the first week was on time. But it's a girlish time of year. Please drive slowly. Be mindful out there on the roads because, you know, everyone's a little different schedules now. So thank you.
Okay, just clarification on one of those points, Barry, about the MOA. So the DOE sent out a memo stating that they would have an updated MOA sometime in the middle of this month. So just if we follow the typical pattern of the DOE, we could probably expect it on Friday at about 4:30. So then we'll be able to go through the process at that point and share with the board. So my bet is either this Friday or next Friday, we should have that in our hands.
Well, thank you. I mean, and you have to adjust it so we understand the time involved with it. So thank you for that update.
We're now up to item number 8, the committee reports. Up first is Academic Committee with Mrs. Levitt.
Next meeting is September 21st.
That's a change, but we've all agreed to that time, right? No. September is the meetings after that have changed. Sorry, it's all running together. Up next is Community Relations with Mrs. Freelander.
Our meeting is this Friday, September 15th, virtually at 8:45.
We're now up to Finance, Facilities, and Transportation with Mr. Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Singer. We met on September 5th at 5:30 at the Wade Building. In attendance is Mr. Stars, Mr. Beers, Mr. Pepe, Mr. Singer, and myself. The first discussion on the agenda was that we reviewed the business agenda. As you see, there were some changes in the Crim parking lot and the high school, some paving area. We added an area that was asphalt, became concrete, much better for the outdoor use. We also talked about the DOE requirement and the comprehensive maintenance plan. So, as a board, we had consensually approved all the motions on this evening. Any questions? Seeing none. Mr. Stars gave us an update on the projects. As everyone's seen, we've had a lot of projects throughout the district going on this year, and probably will be, compared to the future, it's pretty light, but it was kind of exciting what's been going on. Crim and the high school outdoor dining area, had a lot of paving there. The middle school, the fire alarms have been done at JFK and Eisenhower. There's a couple more items that still need done. There's some railings need to be added and some that. We've had some discussions. There's a permit waiting time. We were working with the trying to get done for the auditorium, so there's been some delay there, but we're working on that, getting them moved forward. We had an update on the middle school bridge. The bridge was damaged during Ida, and so we've had to, when you work with wetlands, you have a lot of back and forth to state. So we had that back and forth that they've got a plan. So I think the pilings will be going in, he said, in October, November timeframe, and the bridge will be placed in February. So that's the lower bridge. And the upper bridge there's an upper bridge there will be serviced and worked on also. We talked about the high school auditorium timeframe schedule, and there's a lot of referendum design work going on right now. So they're looking at some of the windows out for bid. Also, they're looking at some of the phase 1 areas of the different HVAC, studying the loads and the impacts on the buildings and how they want to do it. There looks like they might be going out to bid in November for the middle school bathrooms. And also we're talking about the doors and the door harbor bids will be going out also. So lots of things progressing with the referendum, a lot of back and forth. We have a project manager working on it, and Bob, I forget Bob's last name, and Mr. Stars is off to doing great. And there's nothing at that time. Any questions on that? Other matters, we had some discussions about district-wide security, very similar to what Mr. Beers explained to us. He talked a lot about that. We talked about transportation, making sure that all the bus routes were covered. It was the day before school started, and we always said we got all the routes covered because 2 years ago we had a situation where we lost 40 routes 2 weeks before school, so we were in good shape there. And we also talked about there's a sewer bill, meter bill opening that was coming, and it is actually going to on the agenda for rejecting because there's some issues with it. And this time of year is the audit, so the auditors have been. Are they done in the building, or are they still here?
They're out of the building, but
Lots of back and forth. Yeah, so the auditors come through. So, and then we'll get a preliminary report in around October, the management report. But when it comes to the audit, there's a time frame because there's a lot of the I think they're called CASLs, those different reports we get from the state that delay the audit. CAFRs. Pension report, pension numbers in different areas that delay the audit to the final, and we'll be approving probably in the March timeframe. Any questions? Our next meeting day is October 16th at 5:30 at the Wade Building, and we adjourned at 6:24.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Up next is the Climate Committee with Mrs. Lochran.
We met on September 8th at 9 a.m. In attendance was myself, Ms. Calistri, Mr. Walker, Mr. Singer, and Mr. Beers. We discussed committee goals. Discussion was why the change from HIB to Climate Committee. And further discussion was the consistency with HIB and stakeholder access to educational resources with regards to HIB. The recommendation was consistent with board goals, was to review policies as it relates to safety, student conduct, and wellness. And further recommendation was to meet periodically to review the code of conduct and related reporting. Any questions or comments?
Can I have a comment? I'm curious, when we say school climate, it's more specific, and people would more likely understand that. When we just name the committee as Climate Committee, I think a lot of people may not know what this committee does. I'm just thinking, can we consider the name of it to be more specific? Maybe school climate would be more specific to illustrate what this committee scope and everything is. Just a suggestion.
Fair enough. And I do believe that School Climate Committee was actually the original name that we discussed, and it just got shortened, so it's a good point.
Okay.
So the second topic was the review of Code of Conduct. The discussion, we reviewed the Code of Conduct and age-appropriate disciplinary protocols. Also, part of that discussion was that we reviewed the changes to the Code of Conduct. And further, we discussed the re-entry from suspension for repeat behaviors. And the recommendation was to have periodic committee meetings and discuss with the board of the whole. Any questions or comments?
Question, just in general, and you explained a little bit earlier. So all of the grades, K through, or 1st through 4, 5th, 6th, so they're all independent for each of the schools, right? So they're necessarily not going to have the same verbiage, same language. So that's one, which I gather, and I think you answered that. And secondly, I wrote this down, the first offense, which starts for 1 to 3 day in school or out of school suspension, is that the general timeline, 1 to 3 days in school or out of school, or would it be like right off the bat, 5 days out? Or is that just a general
Yeah, so I the easier part is the first section. So what we hopefully accomplished with this initiative was now across the 7 primary schools, right, K to 4, there's a consistent code of conduct that we follow. The intermediate schools collaborated on that, and then as we know, the middle school and high school are standalone. So those were the areas we tried to get consistent themes throughout. And as far as the first part, I think it just depends on the offense. Again, the goal is not to, part of our goal is to reduce, right, you walk a fine line, you want to reduce the number of suspensions or days of suspensions, but you also have to make sure that there are clear consequences for certain actions.
right, that may disrupt the educational process for other kids who are in the room. So it's a little bit of a dance, and there's no exact science with it. And again, it's something that can always be monitored and adjusted, each year.
Okay, so going back to the other stuff of each school implementing their own code of conduct, let's just say. So I guess that answers my question why there is no across the board consistency for each school. It makes sense to me now because you're going to have a separate code of conduct for a second grader versus a senior in high school.
Correct.
It makes sense now.
And certain offenses aren't going to be in there, obviously. A driving violation, unless
And then each
Let's-
school will be in charge of enforcing, I don't want to use the word enforcing, but enforcing their own code of conduct. So it's,
correct. Part of this is we ensure that, we're working to ensure, I should say, that any violations under the code of conduct are entered into Power School. That's how we run the reports at the end of the year. So besides the contact with parents, that it's entered, and we keep track that way.
and this isn't set in stone, so if something comes up or something needs to be taken off, we can adjust it.
Exactly. And
Okay.
yeah, and if something's not on the list that's really egregious, that doesn't stop us from
Okay.
administering certain
Thank you.
discipline.
I guess while we're on the theme, if I could ask about that, I noticed the first 3 sets of code of conduct documents, primary, intermediate, and middle school, have a kind of a disclaimer that's exactly that that at the end of the day, these are all case-by-case bases, and the principal really has the authority to do that. I don't see that statement or a similar statement for the high school. Is that same thing holds, or is there something different there? Obviously, to some degree, there must be, but I don't know if that wasn't there for a reason or if it was.
So I wasn't going to answer the question. I was just going to suggest that we push this conversation towards
Okay.
when we have the action item before us,
Okay.
if that's okay.
Fine by me.
So the last topic we discussed was a review of the review of school climate survey. The discussion was school security, and much of what we discussed was covered in the superintendent's report. Cooperative Bridgewater and Raritan Police Department initiatives, campus monitors and Class 3 officers and their qualifications, and the similarity of their qualifications. The September 26th meeting, which is the securities protocol presentation, and the number of law enforcement officers and security resources that we have in the district. And the recommendation was to review the climate survey as it pertains to security, student conduct, and wellness. Any comments or questions? The meeting adjourned at 10:15 a.m. and the next meeting date is to be determined.
I have a question. So for our climate survey, do we need to inform the parents and ask for consent? I don't know if consent is necessary as a true question. Have we thought about that?
That's a good question, and we're going to run this past the school attorney. But the belief is that it's actually an opt-out versus an opt-in, right? So we push it out, and we say to parents, if you don't want your child to take this survey, please let us know, and they won't.
For the portions that will be in school, do we tell the parents that these surveys are going to take place in school and give the parents an opportunity to opt out?
Absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Luckman. Up next is Personnel Committee with Mr. Joshi.
Our next meeting is on September 19th at 5 p.m.
Thank you, Mr. Joshi. Are there any liaison or delegate reports? Seeing none?
Sorry.
Seeing one, go ahead.
Can I just add that at Town Council it was mentioned once again that the Bridgewater Township Police Department is hosting a 10-week community policing program. As somebody who has taken that program, I can tell you it has given me a great wealth of information, not just as it pertains to the policies with the police department, but also the relationship that they have with our district, because some of the one of the SROs was there, as well as the head of domestic violence, which I found were both two very interesting topics on the matter. So thank you.
Just from the NJSBA, the deadline is coming up to submit resolutions for the delegate assembly. They do work pretty hard to try to pass those into law. They would be due by our next board meeting. The deadline is September 28th. So if anyone had any last minute things they wanted to try, they would have to be approved at the next meeting, or wait until next May, I suppose.
Thank you, Mr. Pepe. And to that regard, NJSBA workshop is coming up. If you haven't already emailed Mr. Starz's administrative assistant, please let her know if you are joining us and what nights. We're up to item number 9, the first public comment section on action items only. Individuals and or groups are invited to present their concerns, comments, and requests regarding the following action items to the Board of Education at this time. In accordance with board policy, members of the public are allotted one opportunity to address the board for a maximum of 5 minutes during this period of the meeting. Please be advised that a video recording of this meeting will be posted on the district website. And again, these are action items under section 11 only. There is a second public comment period later on. Seeing none, I'm going to close that portion of public comment. We're up to item number 10, the approval of minutes.
So moved. Second.
Are there any changes that need to be made to the minutes? Seeing none, Mr. Stars.
Ms. Freelander.
Abstain.
Ms. Lee.
Yes.
Ms. Levitt.
Yes.
Ms. Lochran.
Yes.
Mr. Pepe.
Yes.
Ms. Kalistri.
Yes.
Mr. Joshi.
Yes.
Mr. Walker.
Yes.
Mr. Singer.
Yes, the motion passes. Kevin, do we need to mute our microphones if we're not talking?
It would be helpful, because when you start to hear that ring,
Yep.
it's because there's a lot of microphones, and so once picking up, it's creating a loop into the speaker.
All right. So please be aware of that if you're not actively discussing anything, to mute your microphones. No problems. Up to item number 11, the approval of action items. Up first is Personnel 2409 and 2410.
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions or comments?
I just had a comment. I just wanted to give a shout out to the, I think there was close to 60 students in August and now on the personnel addendum who are applying, our own students applying to work at BR Cares. And I noticed that, and I wanted to recognize them and tell them thank you so much for putting in the time and helping the younger ones. And I hope that some of those names on there are already good leaders at the high school, and I hope that it will create more. So great job, guys.
You stole my thunder. I was about to mention that. So, but I did have a conversation with Dr. Fonder about this before. It is nice to see that a number of our high schoolers are involved, and that our district can make this opportunity available to our high schoolers. And if there are any high schoolers that are still interested in, the job posting remains open all year, right? So that if anyone is interested later on in the year, or they just heard about it and they want to apply, the BR Cares is always looking for great people.
We also have a couple of openings for a school photographer and videographer to help prepare content for the website, things of that nature. So that's posted as well. So I know Mr. Moran is working on that, and we're looking to interview kids in short order to really help us with preparation of content for our website and for social media.
Thank you, Mr. Bruce. Are there any other comments or questions? Seeing none, Mr. Stars.
Ms. Freelander.
Yes.
Ms. Lee.
Yes.
Ms. Levitt.
Yes.
Ms. Lochran.
Yes.
Mr. Pepe.
Yes.
Ms. Kalistri.
Yes.
Mr. Joshi.
Yes.
Mr. Walker.
Yes.
Mr. Singer.
Yes, the motion passes. We're up to Curriculum 2410 and Curriculum 2411.
So moved. Second.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, Mr. Stars.
Ms. Freelander.
Yes.
Ms. Lee.
Yes.
Ms. Levitt.
Yes.
Ms. Lochran.
Yes.
Mr. Pepe.
Yes.
Ms. Kalistri.
Yes.
Mr. Joshi.
Yes.
Mr. Walker.
Yes.
Mr. Singer.
Yes, the motion passes. I'm sorry, it's just amusing seeing the lights go on and off as people anticipate. The motion passes. We're up to Business 2425 through Business 2434.
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions or comments?
I just wanted to, I think, Imagine Learning is the part of the credit recovery program being used in the high school. So that's the start of some of the action plans and the board goals. So we discussed this at FFT. Just want to get more of that was on the business agenda. Share that with everyone.
Anyone else? I just want to extend thank you again to the Crim PTO for supplying new basketball hoops and new dunk lock systems.
Gotta worry about the fourth graders.
Who can dunk? Yeah.
It's actually worth driving by Crim to see the work that's been done there. It's amazing. You know, the awning was there for 50 years, and you take it away, it looks like a little different school. A lot of the work was done from the mitigation from the Ida 2 years ago, and then the follow-up. That's the reason why that was done there at this time. So it just was some of the things you'll see in the future in the other schools. So.
Mr. Stars, I had a question on Business 2434. Is that bid going to go back out?
Yes.
And when do you expect that to?
Upon approval of this motion, probably early next week at the latest.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, Mr. Stars.
Ms. Freelander.
Yes.
Ms. Lee.
Yes.
Ms. Levitt.
Yes.
Ms. Lochran.
Yes.
Mr. Pepe.
Yes.
Ms. Kalistri.
Yes to all abstain from 24-25.
Mr. Joshi.
Yes.
Mr. Walker.
Yes.
Mr. Singer.
Yes, the motion passes. We are up to Special Services 2408 through Special Services 2410.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments? As I see no lights on, Mr. Stars.
Ms. Freelander.
Yes.
Ms. Lee.
Yes.
Ms. Levitt.
Yes.
Ms. Lochran.
Yes.
Mr. Pepe.
Yes.
Ms. Kalistri.
Yes.
Mr. Joshi.
Yes.
Mr. Walker.
Yes.
Mr. Singer.
Yes, the motion passes. We're up to other 2406 through 2409.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or comments? Mr. Pepe, I cut you off before from your question on code of conduct.
Oh,
so
no,
now
no
would be a good
problem.
time.
I should have waited till now. I actually found that, someone found, thank you for finding the similar language in the high school document. I just missed it.
And it's,
So thank you.
And you're right, that statement is very similar to what happens in a lot of job descriptions, and it's like that final line of anything not on here still can be on here.
Right.
Just like a job description and any other thing that we haven't mentioned yet.
You're
as
bound to
assigned by
find
your
something.
supervisor.
I think almost every week I see something new in the classroom I haven't had to deal with before.
So yes.
Small or major, you know.
And that's important to know with a code of conduct. If it doesn't appear on here, that doesn't mean you're scot-free, right? So there are plenty of infractions, there are plenty of things that young people learn from. Let's say that, and we figure out what fits and if it doesn't fit.
And I think, I would imagine, at least in some of the schools and in many of the primary schools, if not all, hand in hand with this, there are incentives to do the right thing and rewards for school-wide individual for doing a great job, which I'm sure most people do most of the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we look through this, especially the code of conduct with kindergarten through fourth grade, remember that you don't want to suspend kids at that level. It's really frowned upon. So you try to create a learning experience, and many times we know with young people, they may do things and they don't quite know the impact of what they're doing. And that doesn't absolve them from it, but that's part of the teaching process that elementary school teachers do an awesome job with every day, and principals. I mean, honestly, and I know as an elementary school teacher, Mr. Pepe, you know, but I'm amazed really at the work that elementary teachers do with young people as far as teaching them just how to behave in a group setting. And those are the skills that really go beyond, the curriculum, et cetera, but they give those gentle nudges and they model behaviors consistently. And it's amazing that they can do that with 20 kids. So I could never do it. God bless him for doing that.
I just wanted to add to his, or just piggyback off of your comment and encourage just more conversation about like a culture of upstandership. You know, we talk a lot about or we have been talking a lot about the repercussions, but also just encouraging upstandership. I don't really know how to go further on that.
There's actually policy on that we need to recognize students who are doing the right things and who are being model students, and that is something that sometimes gets lost in the weeds and needs to be highlighted. You're right.
You know what the
5600.
It is.
Sure, and the reason was that people worked in their grade bands. I think you see certain themes, but you're right, some of the language is a little bit different. So I mean, that's certainly something in the future we'll work to bring more in line. But I think when you look at the consequences for certain offenses and you see, let's say, the most severe actions that occur at a school, I think you see a lot of consistency between the two documents, even though, for some, it's for instance, the inappropriate language or the biased language, it's slightly different, but I think, again, the theme is the same. And that's what we're looking for.
So, expanding on that, I had sort of the same questions, and I know I sent them to you, Bob. And some of them, like you said, the bias ones, it's pretty clear that they're saying the same thing. I mean, for continuity's sake, I would love to see them have the exact same wording, but it's relatively minor. But there are a few things that are in the middle school one that maybe aren't in the high school one, like harassment, threatening behavior, terroristic threats, and I don't think any of those go away in the high school. It's not like parking that only applies to the high school. And I'm not really questioning the consequences. It seems like the consequences are progressive, like you said, as they get older, it gets more severe, and this first and second offense, which makes total sense. But I don't know why, harassment is in primary school one, but not in intermediate or high school, but is in middle school. Why is it called out some places? Yeah, and I know that this is sort of an overriding theme that we as a board have been looking at, trying to encourage district level consistency amongst the schools and stuff. So for me, I just would like to see this cleaned up more. It's not really reviewing the content so much as clarity.
I'm still going to say I think it's clear. That's where I'll push back a little bit. And when you look at certain things such as the high school, and I could tell you the thought process, where you see something such as inappropriate language, and it's lunch detention up to 5 days or out of school suspension. All right, obviously they're looking to that as an umbrella for some of those things you mentioned, like a terroristic threat, harassing talk, things of that nature. So that was the thought process in going into that. Just so you know, it is covered in it, but I do understand what you're saying about wanting things to be a little bit more consistent with language. But I think things, if you look at any of these on their own, I don't think anyone could say they're confused. Right, if I'm looking at the high school, I don't see anything confusing in this document. The middle school, there's nothing confusing here. So as far as the language matching, that's something, I could take that and we work towards, but I don't think that eliminates the overall theme of what we're trying to do. Because we haven't done it in 7 years.
If I can continue on this same scheme of consistency, I think that I'll give you an example. In high school, we call it drug, and in middle school, we call it a controlled substance. I think there is good reason to kind of use the same consistent language, the same, right? And then in terms of the same infraction per se, and in high school, for example, dress code. In high school, it's warning, 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 plus 1 day detention. And in middle school, the same dress code is warning, detention, ISS. Is there a reason to believe that high school should have a less dress code?
I'm looking
rule?
here, warning, 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 1 day detention.
Yeah, that's high school. However, middle
No,
school.
that's middle school. Dress code, warning,
Do I
warning,
have a different version than you?
warning. High school, warning, warning.
Intermediate, I think you might be looking at, Lucy.
Okay, then probably it's intermediate. One of them says warning, detention, ISS. When progress to high school, it become a different standard.
So
I don't know.
I guess I'd like to hear from other board members if they have concerns, if they think, I personally would love to see this tabled and just the language cleaned up and then come back, because I don't want to vote no on it.
I would say if the board, I place this on the agenda for approval. I think we need to vote up or down. I don't know what Robert's rules are. It's the board's decision if they want to approve it or disapprove it. But I think I need that vote to disapprove it, and then we'll come to you with something else.
I would like to make a motion to refer to committee so that we have chance to clean it up, tie up any loose ends.
It's not a committee item. It's an
Any resolution.
I just want to fill that. It's an administrative function.
If
That will be approved by the Board of Education as a whole. There's no committee that works on this. I just want that to be clear. Again, I've put it forth for a vote. I respect whatever decision the Board of Education wants to make, and we'll go accordingly. But there's no committee to push this to.
I have 2 questions. The first question is, I don't remember ever voting on this before. So has this been brought before the board for vote on a prior occasion? And what was the decision what was the decision in making and doing it if not?
So I have, I think, an answer to that one. This was brought to the board in 2016, I believe. Our policy and regulation that covers this is 5600. The policy says that that board shall approve the chart. I don't think we've seen this before because I don't think there's been substantive changes to it in 7 years. So I think that's why we haven't seen it. The superintendent is supposed to review it annually or have a delegate review it annually. And we're also supposed to review the policy and regulation annually, but I don't think we have to vote on it every year. We do have to vote on it, though, pursuant to regulation.
So one thing I have to ask you, Bob, the way it's written, it is easy to enforce. I mean, the wording in here is easy for you to, or for the district to enforce. I think from what I'm hearing, the message I'm getting is that maybe by polishing this up, you may be able to enforce it a little bit more. There's no in between there, you know, in the wording. But if you feel that this is, you know, good enough to enforce as it stands, then we're okay. And like we said before, it still can be tweaked and it still can be adjusted. But if you feel it's
Yeah,
okay.
sure. I mean, what we're looking at is this. It's what I'm hearing from the board is that certain folks want the language to match more between each grade band. I can do that. I can do that without Board of Education approval because basically we're voting on a code of conduct and really what the board should be looking at. Right, when you look at some of your board trainings, okay, on a code of conduct, it's not that, hey, I think this should be a suspension versus OSS versus ISS versus a detention. It's when we look at these documents, is there bias? Right? Is there bias where someone of a certain race, sex, etc., would be targeted? Is it clear? Right, and you have to look at one by one, right? The high school, is it clear? All right, and then finally, did the administration go through a process where we looked at disproportionality data? We had people work together and propose that. So typically, in my experiences, most places, it's just a very simple up-down and you move on. I mean, we've decided to really sink our teeth into that, which I applaud, but by the same token, there's no committee to refer this to. It goes back to administration. If the board votes no, it would go back to administration. We would make edits and I'd come back at the next meeting with edits based on feedback that I received.
Bob,
Because school did start.
rather than vote no, like, I'm not saying the majority would, but would it, like, if I made a motion to table it, and then you could make, you said it was no big deal, because I don't have a big problem with the content, like you said, like, that's your administration purview, and you got it. But I just want to see the continuity between the grade bands and...
As far as language.
Yeah. And
You
certain
still
things
have to
being
vote. I
certain
think you
things being included, like
well, but now it's
terroristic threats. Like, why is that only at
Okay.
the middle school?
So I did explain it, and we can do it. But again, I don't know Robert's rules back and forth, but I think we have to vote yes or no. Because I'm proposing, does the board accept the code of conduct? If the answer is no, I accept it. But we have to say no, and then we go and do that. We're punting. I don't know if punting is an option here.
Can you explain a little bit about the process that you went through to do this? It was over the summer, correct?
Sure. We had a committee back in June. We shared data. We looked at certain things that we thought were problematic, such as we had a rise in violence at many of our schools, which is not unlike many schools in the state of New Jersey. We also saw an increase in certain forms of speech that are inappropriate. We said that biased language. So those are areas that we wanted to address. We wanted to also make sure that discipline was progressive, age appropriate, and also that we would go through the process. So I mean, that's what we went through.
And on that committee, that was administrators from each of the schools.
And then they worked on it in groups and gave it to me.
And did the elementary schools each have separate, like, code of conduct or documentation, or okay?
They
So-
were used
So
in
they
different
were,
things.
they were all consolidated this year
Yes.
and made into one concise document. And that was,
It
that was
doesn't
the
sound
goal.
like anyone has a problem with that, right?
No.
Yes,
Thank you.
you're correct, though. So all 7 of our primary schools use the same.
So when we looked at it, I mean, for one thing, this isn't appropriate to do in committee, like this is administrative purview, but should maybe this policy be like the first, since we're doing a review of policy anyway, be what academic attacks first kind of thing, or?
It's got to be approved by the whole board.
No, I know,
It's a
but-
separate question. She's asking,
It-
should we also review the policy and regulations?
Oh, okay. I get it.
Separate from, yeah,
And that was
That's a-
one question I have here, too.
okay,
That's a great recommendation.
okay.
I don't know that there's a, we don't need to update policy and regulation to do this,
Right,
I believe. I took a brief look at it today. I don't think that there's anything in conflict. But I do think it's probably a good idea to take a look at it. Just because we have a goal that
Because
that I'm gonna get to in a minute,
as I
hopefully.
noted that in the policy, there was the requirement for committee, which mostly sounds like what he's talking about, except that it
it's-
says community members. So.
There are community
Oh, there are
members.
community members. Okay, great.
Can I ask an overarching discipline question? I mean, you really don't want to have to discipline a child unless you have to. I just Dr. Founder or Bob. How does that, in the scenario of disciplining a child for something of contact or in a school building, how does that work? What's the thought process? And I guess, in those areas when something like, one incident happens, the minor, high, major, just what's the process that goes through in that discipline cycle? If this is appropriate, I can move on to later in the session, like Steve. It's up to you.
Typically what happens, it's a referral to the main office, the assistant principal or principal at the lower levels gets involved. Talk to the kid, interview others, depends on the offense, and then it's used as a reference to really guide what we do. And like I said, I think K to 4 is very clear where we don't want to be in the business, let's say, of suspending kids or harsh punishments. It's really a learning opportunity because where the difference might be in certain things that may be offensive. You have plenty of kids who may blurt things out and don't quite know the meaning of them, especially in grades K through 1, et cetera. And that's why you'd have certain punishments with a range, and you also have to take into account if the young person has a disability, right? I think we know, right? It's an extreme example, but you may have a child in an autistic class who blurts certain words out, and you're not going to ring them up on the code of conduct for inappropriate language, right? And that's what happens. But there's a judgment call, just about all.
And I would agree completely. I would just add from my experience, not only as a primary school principal, but also in working with the other administrators, always there's this look at what can the school personnel, the school administrators do to make this less likely to happen in the future. And so part of that is a consequence, but another part of it is what does the student need to know, or what mindset needs to shift so that if the same situation presents itself again, there's a different, better outcome. And so depending on what happened depends on how you achieve that, but whether that's kind of an initial conversation and then working with the school counselor afterwards, or it's just kind of like a talk through, next time this happens, you're going to, the most common one at the primary level, talk to an adult. If somebody takes your ball away next time, what are you going to do? You're going to go and tell an adult. You're not going to try to take matters into your own hands.
Go ahead, Lucy.
I want to say more about this code of conduct. I think it is a very important document. It is what our students and our teachers conduct their day to day, and this needs to have certain level of continuity and consistency and stability. I think there should be great care taken into it so that the students are not yanked around when we make changes into it. So we should take great care so that we don't look to change it once we prove it. We do over periodic review, but we're not looking with the document with flaw and thinking about going to change it immediately down a few days and still approve it. That being said, I want to say that our board governs by policies, and there is a policy in place for code of conduct. That's policy number 5600. In that policy, it specifies not only punitive consequences like what this chart that's presented for us to vote right now. It has the whole guidance about what is expected as well. So I think that would be the whole picture of code of conduct. And in that policy, there is a section calling for a disciplinary chart. I think that is what this document in front of our face is about. I think when we look at this resolution, it even shouldn't be called district code of conduct. It is more properly the disciplinary chart. The code of conduct is our district policy 5600, which is the process we should follow now with this discussion as well.
I just got a comment in general, but if anyone wanted to respond to that specifically.
I'll continue then. So with that said, I think it's possible for the board process to play out as reference to a committee, because policy number 5600, there is a committee that's in charge of that policy, which is academic committee. I think we should refer it to academic committee. And I earlier had made the motion. I don't know if that was lost into the discussion. I think Jessica also made a motion to table. I don't know, like, do you still have that motion?
So there was no motion to table. There was a question about whether or not she should make a motion to table. So that's first of all. Second of all, policy and regulation can be referred to committee. This is not something that gets referred to committee because, again, this is something that the superintendent puts up for approval. So this is not something that gets put to committee. The policy and the regulation do, and we've already discussed putting that to academic at the next meeting.
I think the policy number 5600 governs the whole action of code of conduct.
The policies and regulation govern the actions of administrators all throughout school. That doesn't mean that the documents that are referenced therein that don't require board insight have to be referred to committee.
I think we should follow policy number 5600.
I think we're following policy 5600, which says that the superintendent adopts the chart of discipline.
So this is chart of discipline?
Correct.
So, yeah, it actually says, if you look at the document, pull the document, it says student discipline code of conduct in the first part. The top of the title of the chart is code of conduct. But if you go through each one, it says, it says student discipline code of conduct. And in the middle school and high school, it says student discipline. So it's very clear, I think, in the chart that goes in the handbook, it says student discipline. And that's what the policy reads.
And I also want to refer to policy 5600, which reads, the superintendent of schools will establish a process for the annual review and update of the district's student discipline / code of conduct policy, which is what is here for some of it, and regulation that may involve a committee of parents, students, and community members. It's the superintendent's responsibility to review this. It is not the Board of Education's review.
If I could make just a general comment. I think it's a great document. I think that clearly a lot of work went into it at the building level, which is where I think a lot of this happens. In a perfect world, every school in our district, every district in our state, and maybe every state in the country would have the exact same code of conduct. But if principals and administrators have found a progression of discipline that works for them and their students and their overall community, I'm comfortable supporting it. And there are a lot, more than comfortable supporting it. There are lots of students in the state who, before they get to high school, pass through 1, 2, 3, 4 school districts before they get to high school, based on K to 5, and they go to regional middle school and then a regional high school. And I don't think it's realistic that those documents aren't going to be exactly the same. But I think what is the same is, you would hope that each one of those schools is led by teachers and staff who are looking to do the right thing. And even if the wording is different, it would be great if it were exactly the same. The wording might be different in one district to the next. I don't think that's not the main takeaway from me here. If this is something that works for our schools, I'm personally comfortable supporting it and will. That's just my take.
Can I make a comment? Can I make a motion actually to refer to committee?
It doesn't get
Nobody-
referred to committee.
If it doesn't stick,
can make
that's
that
okay.
motion.
I'm making that motion.
Is there a second? As I don't see a second, that motion does not pass.
I just wanted to add to Mike's comment that I think when you're looking at like a working document and something that, especially something that is collaborated on by a lot of sources, it's difficult, especially since this hasn't been done in a very long time, to have the expectation that it's going to meet this standard of continuity that we're kind of talking about, especially when I think that it would be prudent to have a code of conduct that's approved in place at the beginning of the school year, since it was reviewed over the summer by a lot of professionals who have way more experience in education than I do. That's my comment.
I'm going to call the question.
Okay, but I'd like to talk about other things that are on there. So can you call it a specific question, or are you calling the question on all of it?
I'm calling the question on the agenda.
Okay. Is there a second? Do we need a second for that, Peter? We need a second for that.
I'm calling the question. I'm calling the vote. I'm calling the vote.
On other 2409 specifically, or the whole other
The whole
motion?
thing.
I want to talk about other items. You can call for this particular question.
He's made his motion.
For which question?
For all of it. He said he made his motion for all of it. That's why I asked him that.
But there's other questions we
No,
haven't
no,
talked
no,
about yet.
There's no discussion on this. The motion is made. Is there a second?
Oh,
As I don't see a
I'll
second.
second the motion.
So are we not talking about other items, for example, 2407, 08, 09, altogether?
This is the motion
We've been
itself.
talking about 09. How about
So it has to be voted on then.
24, 06, 07?
So this is a
And
motion
08.
to call the question. The motion to call the question will be voted on. If the question is called, then we vote on other 2406 to other 2409.
Can you explain what does it mean by call for question?
Calling the question is trying to close discussion so that we can vote on these things.
On
First-
all 4 items.
First, you vote on whether or not we're going to close discussion.
Mm-hmm.
If that passes by a 2/3 vote, you said, Peter,
Yes.
then we vote. If it doesn't pass, the discussion remains open.
Can I make a modest proposal as a seconder of that? Would you be interested in amending that to a motion to separate out other 2409 and calling the question on that specifically?
Well, I'm calling the question. The reason I'm calling the question is sometimes this conversation we need to do what's best for kids. And in this conversation about discipline, I don't think what we're discussing is best for kids. We need to discipline at the high school, and we're talking about some semantics and names here, and student discipline code of conduct, which is reference policy, and we're not getting anywhere. I want to focus on what's best for kids.
So
I can pull the motion back if the conversation go, but that's the reason why I made the motion.
well, there is
Focus on best for kids.
currently a motion and a second. We need to take a vote on that.
So I should take the vote now.
Mr. Starrs, could you please call the roll?
Ms. Friedlander,
Yes.
Ms. Lee,
No.
Ms. Levitt,
No.
Ms. Lochran,
Your microphone's not on.
Yes.
Mr. Pepe,
Yes.
Ms. Calistri,
No.
Mr. Joshi,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Mr. Singer.
No. And it didn't pass anyhow because there was not 2/3. So discussion remains open. I would, however, suggest that we move past code of conduct, as I think we've beaten that to death at this point. So if there are comments on the other items, I'll entertain those. Ms. Lee?
I have comments about our district goals. I think, as I have mentioned earlier, that when it comes to referendum, we cannot take a side on the yes or no. I would like to point out that under Goal 3, there's a line for referendum. we're asking the public to vote sincerely their opinion about full-day kindergarten, and I think we should let that play out. So in that language, there's the full-day kindergarten and successive vote. I would like to make a motion to amend that document, removing that line.
Is there a second to that motion? As I don't see a second to that motion, the motion does not pass. I will comment on that as well. Yes, we must remain neutral in telling people, giving people information, and we cannot tell people how to vote one way or the other. But this board voted to put a referendum before the people.
Yes.
So we get to put that before the people. I don't think that if the board did not want the referendum to succeed, they would have put it before the people. So I think it's inherent in that.
But only and if only the public approves it, can it become a district goal? We cannot put it as a goal
is
before.
Not the initiation of full-day kindergarten. The goal is putting it up forward as referendum.
I don't see the word yes on here.
There's the word success.
Where, what slide was that today?
On that line, there's the word successive vote. On the district goal.
Success can mean a lot of things.
It can be completion, but it cannot be success.
Completion. The vote completed, correct? So there was a vote, and it completed will be November 7th. Is that success?
Right, and I do. I
I'm
also.
just going to ask, what does success mean?
I also believe
success
like
can mean a lot of things. I mean, a
go ahead.
student who gets a C versus a B, he came up and achieved. Is that success? So success can be measured many different ways, and I think success is the completion of the vote. The county clerk put it up there. We put the right paperwork in. We put it up there. We've educated and informed the people. Everything's out there. That's success. How they vote is their opinion. I hope people come out and vote, and they have an opinion on that, and it's a right and a privilege in this country. But success would mean that the vote happens.
So one other thing. I think the way that it's written, I understand the goal, but the goal is to ensure the equitable allocation of district resources. An action item to achieve that goal is full-day kindergarten. But we're not, so obviously if it doesn't pass, that has to be taken off, and we have to meet that goal with the other action items. But what they're saying is if it passes, this is how I interpreted that action item will help to, what's the word I'm looking for? Make that goal succeed. That's how I interpret it. And isn't that how it's supposed to be? These are action items that we're using to achieve a goal.
And this is also the administration's district goals. I think the administration has expressed their desire to have full-day kindergarten in order to address inequities within the district. So if that's their goal, if that's their ultimate goal, then this is one of their action items. If
the word success is just saying that's the evidence, in my opinion. If the action item is to pass full-day kindergarten, if we succeed, that's the evidence.
I think the action item shouldn't be to pass the full-day kindergarten referendum. It should be to hold the referendum. And the completion of that vote, that's in the neutral language.
But does the
The
board
word
have
like pass
any?
or succeed, they're all inclination for a yes.
This is just evidence.
But does the board even have any, like, is it our role to tell the district what their goal is? What their action item is to achieve that goal? Is that our role, or is it our role to come up with our own action items and goals?
I mean, if we were having like a community night that we wanted to get people out to, and we said our goal is to get a lot of people to come out and support this, be part of this community night and learning, and man, we had a lot of those last year. We're not telling people they have to come. We're not telling people that they should. We're saying they should come. I think this is similar to something like that. We're trying to get people involved, and then it's up to them what they take from it and how they act once they get the voting booth.
I think if our goal is to hold the referendum, that's fine. And I think that language to be changed from success to completion.
Okay, well, there's already been a motion that did not get a second, so I think we can move forward past that right now.
In that light, then I have to say that although I support a lot of the goals, there's great action items and great goals, but for that particular reason, I will have to vote no to this. But I do want to support the other items. I want that to be understood.
Anyone
Recall
else?
the question?
I have
You've
more
just done that.
comments.
Well, we have a motion to call the question now. Do we need a second? No second? Motion's not called. Ms. Lee, you said you had
Yes,
something
thank
else to say?
I have a comment about item number 2407. Sorry, 2408. That's about our board. I have, during our board retreat, mentioned the importance of communication with the public. And I understand that during that retreat, there's no action that can be taken. So I'm making my motion now to amend in our board goal that we add a language to ensure communication with the public. Can I read the language that I would like to
You've
add?
made the motion. I'm
Okay.
waiting to hear if there's a second.
All right, I'd like to make a motion to add to our board goal the following language. Communication. That board maintain effective two-way communication with the public with the aim of board interpreting to the staff the aspiration of the community for its school.
Is there a second?
You want this to be another goal?
Yes.
Is there a second? Seeing none, that doesn't pass. I'm also going to say that we actually discussed this
Yes.
already
Yeah.
as a board
Yes.
and came up with these four and decided that these four were the ones to come up with. You had already spoken about this, and we had decided as a board not to do that. To make this motion, I feel, is not appropriate at this time, but it doesn't matter because the motion did not pass. Is there any other comment on the other 2406 through 2409?
I would like to make a comment about your comment about improper. I think that
Point of order.
I was hoping.
Point of order, that's actually not about the discussion we're having on, correct? It's about his comment, not the items on the agenda.
I am responding to a comment. Can I, Mr. President?
Go ahead.
Thank you. I was hoping that our board will change his mind after I bring it up last time. And last time, I couldn't make a motion anyway because we're in retreat. We cannot take actions. So right now, this is action I'm taking as a board member at this opportunity, hoping that we'll get our board member to come along. Thank you for giving me the chance to speak.
Sure. If there are no other comments or questions, I'm going to make a quick one, if that's okay. I want to thank our administration for continuing to test new ideas and make improvements to the district, whether it be through adopting new programming or changing curricula, revising school schedules, or providing opportunities for professional development to the district staff. Similarly, some of our board goals are directed to the development of our board members through the review of policy and attendance at numerous seminars being offered at NJSBA workshop. In addition, the board has proposed goals that support the referendum process and the strategic planning that the district will undertake this fall. I just want to take a brief moment to thank our board members for volunteering their time, attention, and energy to the district. And as always, I want to thank our administrators for developing these district goals and all of our staff who will be working diligently on the action items to support these goals. With that, I'm going to ask that Mr. Stars call the roll.
Ms. Freelander?
Yes.
Ms. Lee?
Yes to 2406, no to the rest.
2406, yes, and no to the rest. Ms. Levitt?
Yes to all except for other 2409, no.
Ms. Lochran?
Yes.
Mr. Pepe?
Yes.
Ms. Calistri?
Yes.
Mr. Joshi?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Singer?
No to 2409, yes to the rest. And the motion passes. There's no policy tonight, so we are now open to up to item number 12, our second public comment period. Individuals and or groups are invited to present their concerns, comments, and requests to the Board of Education at this time on any matters. In accordance with board policy, members of the public are allotted one opportunity to address the board for a maximum of 5 minutes during this period of the meeting. Please be
Testing,
advised
test.
that sorry. Please be advised that a video recording of this meeting will be posted on the district website. We ask that you state your name and residence for the record. And I just want to mention, because this was something that we talked about at our retreat, that please understand that our public forums are not structured as question and answer sessions, but offered as an opportunity for the public to share their thoughts with the board. If there is an instance where the board feels that there is a misunderstanding or inaccuracy, either myself as board president or the administration may address the comment.
Marian Adler, 145 Linden Street. On this past Thursday, September 7th at 1:20 p.m., I was waiting in front of my house for my daughter's bus to drop her off. Instead, I had a voice message come through from her phone. It just said, "Mom, I'm scared," and cut out. I could hear the fear in her 9-year-old voice and yelling behind her. I couldn't tell if the background noise was other scared kids or just kids being loud. Even now, knowing that she is fine, I can feel the emotions that washed over me as I frantically called her back. She proceeded to tell me, "I think the bus driver doesn't know I'm on the bus because he didn't drop me off." I talked her through what to do and then called transportation and tried every extension, getting voicemail every time. I then emailed them putting "kid left on bus" in the subject line to get their attention, and then called her again to confirm she let the driver know, and waited for her to get home safely, minutes ticking by. No phone calls from the district, no emails. A scared 9-year-old finally arrived home safely and burst into tears in my arms. I went to bed with no communication from the district about a child who was not dropped off at home as expected. No indication anyone even noticed that an email had been sent regarding a child whose stop hadn't been made to drop them off. No one had answered the phones, so had I not been able to communicate with my child, would I have had to call 911? I'm not exaggerating, because this is not the first time my child didn't get dropped off when expected, with no ability to communicate with transportation. On September 14th, 2021, 2 years ago, my son's bus was 3 hours late to drop him off. Our calls to transportation went unanswered then as well. We called the school, who had to call transportation themselves to determine there was an issue, and yes, he was still on the bus. Our only information from transportation was a text that the bus was running 20 minutes late, sent an hour after dismissal. Thankfully, that child was chill and just wanted to tell me about the adventure when he got home. Both times, I had no way to track their bus, and phone calls and emails to the only people who could went unanswered. Additionally, part of the issue is that students are sent to services rather than services sent to the students. There are 3 additional bus routes just on my block due to the decision in 2020 to send first graders from zoned for Bradley Gardens School elsewhere rather than having a co-taught class there. At least 4 more students, including my daughter, were sent elsewhere over the next 3 years until now, after 6 or more students have been removed from their school, interrupting their social and educational development. For 4th grade, there's a co-taught class at Bradley Gardens. I'm curious how many of the students in that class belong in other schools that had their classes filled by Bradley Gardens students. How many bus routes does the district have due to the decision to send special needs children to services rather than bringing the services to those children? This causes additional workload for transportation and puts many of the most vulnerable students in our district at single student stops on complicated routes and at higher risk for busing issues as a result. I'm not the only parent who has dealt with the insufficient communication from transportation. I know of instances in 2019, 2022, and at least one other this year already where transportation has failed to respond to urgent issues that required timely communication and resolution. Last week, Superintendent Beers wrote regarding transportation issues that this level of service is not aligned with our expectations. My issues are specifically with district communication, not bus company service, but I completely agree. This district needs a means for parents to get through to transportation personnel consistently and immediately during peak times. The current system doesn't work and hasn't been working for the past 4+ years. In my field, when a problem is discovered in a procedure, an investigation is conducted to determine the root cause, and corrective and preventative action is implemented to prevent it from happening again. This investigation includes an assessment of the severity of the risk caused by the issue, with harm or potential harm to life, being the most severe category. Children left on buses is a potential harm to life. Actions exist that can easily be implemented by the district to mitigate this risk. Other districts have implemented them. This isn't a unique or unresolvable issue. Let's not wait until an email says my child got hurt or died on the bus instead of my child is still on the bus. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Adler.
Hello, Rebecca Hasuna, 557 Lime Rock Road. Just a few things as a high school parent. Wanted to thank you for bringing that lunch program back to what we had last year, because I think everyone I've talked to was very, very happy. My daughter's happy, her friends are happy. So I'm really glad to see that what everybody was asking for came through. The other thing is I drop off every day. She doesn't take the bus because she's a diva. We had no idea who all these gentlemen were out on the on the loop, in the kind of dress just like you, Mr. Singer, with the tan pants and the black shirt. And we noticed it every day, but we didn't know what it was. And finally we were going slow, and I said, you know what? These are the security officers. These are the enforcement officers. And I know it made me happy, made my daughter happy. She felt comfortable. She felt like there was a security presence. So besides, helping us make sure we don't hit anyone as we drop off, there was a presence, and it's felt just coming to the school. So that was excellent. And the cell phone policy, love it. It's not just the kids, it's adults too. They just need the rules. They just need to know what to follow, and they'll do it. They just need to be told and have it, as we said, consistent. It's all about consistency. The last thing I'd like to bring up is something for all ages. It's specifically about the calculator situation, because I have a sophomore. She left her first math class feeling like she should provide her own calculator. And I know that I don't think that that's the policy, but that's how she came off of it. And a number of her friends also felt the same way. And then there were other kids from other classes who did not get that impression, who took the survey and said, no, I have one or I don't have one. So to make her comfortable, we bought one. And I know we didn't have to, but we did because she felt like she should. And she signed the survey saying she would provide her own. But I think it just needs to be, again, more consistent because she wasn't sure. And then for all parents, for all the schools, parents want to provide for their kids for the first day of school. They want, the new notebooks. We're all going to Staples. There's a line out the door for a reason. The kids want new supplies. We want to know what to provide for them. And I know it's a policy that nothing is required in school, but it would be awesome if parents over the summer, while all the sales were going on, could look on the website and say, okay, my kid's going into 5th grade at any of our schools. Here is a standard set of things that we should get, and we can pick it up over the year, and we don't all have to scramble on, Tuesday before school starts trying to get these 3 folders or whatever. And it's fine if 1 or 2 extra things come up, but it'd be really nice to just have that standard that we can look at. And then as a sophomore parent, I can say, do I need a calculator? I can look it up and I can say, no, I don't. I don't need to wait for her to figure it out and come back at me. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Sula.
Joseph Kempe, 114 Sherman, Raritan, New Jersey. I guess I won the lottery. We hear of the bus issues as being something that is few and far between, but it's been 2 years in a row now that we have had significant struggles in my neighborhood with the bus. Last year it was my son Nolan, who is a 4th grader at JFK now, who was left on the bus all the way to the bus yard, which turned into a long discussion with members here. It wasn't fully resolved, and still, in my opinion, wasn't fully resolved through March of this year, after September of last year, thanks to having to have extensive conversations about what data is actually even available to parents of students and what the district even can get their hands on. What concerns me in all of this is that yet again we are dealing with the same issues with what could be the same solutions, And it is merely the apathy that I've heard again tonight from this board of, we have difficulties in the first week of school. It's unacceptable. These are children on your property. We have technology to know that our deodorant is 10 stops away. Why do we not know where our children are? We have ways to scan them into things. We can find and track buses. What I suggest to this board is take it upon yourselves as you consider transportation goals to answer two very simple questions. Who is on our bus? Where is that bus? If you cannot answer those questions, you do not have safe buses. You merely have something that hasn't reared itself as a problem yet. And you are lucky that that is the case. But there are districts that are not. And those districts have paid the price, and those children have paid a much more significant price for those errors and that lackadaisical belief and attitude that is leveraged against them in a decision that they are not able to make for themselves. I implore you to take this seriously and finally listen to parents on this issue. Enough is enough. We cannot persist in putting our children at risk while we talk out of the other side of our mouth about the security officers that we've added to these schools. We understand that security is imperative to these students, that their safety is our moral objective. And yet, when I call transportation about the fact that the bus has driven past or ignored the stop or missed my child, and I'm told, well, there's an accident on 22. Well, that has nothing to do with it. What it tells me is that there is zero oversight and there is zero real-time engagement with where our school buses are, and you do not know where my child is. My solution to this should not be arming my child with a cell phone that then he can put in a box in his school so that I know that he got to school on time, that I know that he's safe along the route, and that he's not sitting in a parking lot of ShopRite. But what I'm hearing is that that is the solution that you are counting on. And I think that that's inappropriate, that we need to know where our kids are when you don't have to. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kempe.
My name's Laura Kress. I'm the president of the Bridgewater-Raritan Education Association, and I didn't really plan on saying anything tonight, except I was listening to the conversation back and forth about the code of conduct, and I would just ask that however this get resolved, it get resolved quickly. I do think that we need to have some continuity, some language, but that we need to get the business of what's going on. You know, school has started. And I think we need to get that under control so we can move on with a plan that everybody is really knows and can move forward with. I think I do want to say that for a long time I've been teaching here for this is my 24th year, you know, there's been a lot of independent entities, and no one is actually, to the point of 2016 was the last time anybody even looked at this, and I think so many things have changed since then. The way the world works, our students after COVID, just tons of things. So if we could get that done as soon as possible, I think that would be a benefit to everybody. So thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you, Ms. Kress. Any other comments? Seeing none, I'm going to close that portion of public comment. We're now up to item number 13, old business. Seeing none, we're going to move to item number 14, any new business.
I just had one thing, and it's more of a comment, and actually Rebecca Hasuna totally stole my thunder. I was going to say that as community relations chair, I've been getting a lot of emails, and actually one of them was about the school supply lists. That there was a good idea from a community member that because the governor is doing this new thing with the tax holiday for school supplies, it's happening before most
I just wrote 2 binders on the palm of my hand because I have to remember that for the morning. The only comment I wanted to make was to just recognize and express my gratitude to the parent-teacher organizations. They do so much for all of our schools, and I just wanted to encourage anybody and everybody, stakeholder-wise, to get involved with that.
I'm sorry, I made a mistake. I should have turned to the administration after public comment to have them respond if they have any response. So, Ms. Jones.
I just wanted to make a calculator comment. So the calculator situation did come to my attention last year where students were sometimes teachers were requesting that they buy them. And so what we did was we purchased a whole bunch of calculators so that would not happen. And I had the supervisor actually create a survey last year that was distributed to students so that we would know, if someone needed them or not. We made a slight change. He did the same survey. All kids were surveyed this year in high school taking math classes. And he wrote it himself, and so what and every child had to take it, whether or not they have a calculator, because we didn't want to single anyone out. And it actually gives them, you either write that, you need one, or that you're planning, or you're going to buy your own, but right next to it on the survey, it writes, they wrote not required. So regardless of what anyone's saying, it's on the survey that it is not required for a student to buy a calculator. We can provide calculators, and then we talked about it, and we're not sure where it gets a little messy if some students might go home and just want their own calculator. I have 4 kids. I'm speaking from the perspective maybe of a parent. Or whether some teachers might still, somehow subtly suggest that maybe it would be better if you had your own. I don't know, but we are going to make sure that we get that message out during back to school night and future messages as well, because there is no requirement that they buy a calculator.
I will also just note that even with the schools having them, I bought a calculator that was not good enough. It had to match the exact one that the schools already had. So I had to go get another one.
Just had just one piece of business on Sunday, September 24th in Raritan on on Somerset Street. Now Basilone Street as well will be the Basilone Parade. Marching in that will be the Bridgewater-Raritan High School Marching Band and the Bridgewater-Raritan High School Robotics Club, along with a number of youth organizations that I'm sure have kids from both communities and the wider area. Also, if anyone's a fan of MASH, we have a celebrity this year, Margaret Houlihan, who played in MASH for 250 episodes, and I believe won 2 Emmys for that, will be joining the parade this year. So if you like 80s television, 70s television, come on out and watch her go by, along with a lot of great veterans and organizations. So hope to see. It really is a great event, really one of a kind. It's the only one of the few parades in the country for a specific individual, even though it celebrates everyone. So it's cool. If you've never been there, I encourage everyone to attend that parade.
I would like to thank the public for coming to speak, and I would like to make a proposal to our transportation committee to look into the transportation safety in our next meeting. Thank you.
We usually actually next month the transportation coordinator will be in, and it will be discussed. It's in the it's in the community calendar.
We discussed it at the last FFT meeting.
We discussed last FFT that it would be coming in October to talk about transportation. So it always happens. So we'll make sure that's on the agenda with them. We can discuss it.
Thank you.
Any other new business? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I'm sorry? No. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you. Our next meeting is September 26th, right here. Thank you.